Horizontes, vamos a and this is Nazi Occultism 3. Hitler vs. Magic. European History by the channel Extra History. This has been really awesome series so far. I did not know Nazis were stupid because it's like counterintuitive how successful Nazis were. People like said like, okay, they weren't that successful, but really look at it, right? It's one country after really bad period after World War One, where they basically had no economy, somehow rose to the level where they threatened most of the Europe and the world, made World War II really fucked up. I mean, that level of evilness and that level of like destruction, you have to be somewhat competent, right? But it's surprising that all the pseudoscience and all that shit, they were believing in that, right? But then again, like the first two parts, I watched the video where Hitler actually joined the society. He was like, oh no. So maybe he just exploited them rather than truly believing in them. And like I don't know how next two parts gonna be. I'm guessing it's 4-part series, right? 4 or 5-part series or whatever. So I don't know how next few parts gonna be. Like, does this become a fuel society, right? Does this become like Nazis' ideology or something? Their core component, all this pseudoscience? Because if that's the case, that surprises me, right? How are they that stupid and that successful? I don't know. So let's watch this one.
April 1933. A police flashbulb lights the corpse, lying in a shallow grave southwest of Berlin. It's a male, shot once at close range. The victim is Erich Hanussen, who has been missing for a week. A prominent clairvoyant and occultist, he'd been born to a Jewish family in Vienna before obscuring those origins to cozy up with the rising National Socialists. A close associate with the SA stormtroopers, his predictions had increasingly consisted of anti-Semitic pronouncements and visions of a coming Third Reich. His murder, officially unsolved, may have even been due to his greatest public prediction, that the Nazis would come to power after a fire at the Reichstag. A plan possibly divulged to him in advance by his brown shirt friends, and one they did not want public, giving all the more reason for a team of stormtroopers to...
That is so true, right? A lot of predictions. How did that come true? I don't know. Maybe he knew something, and then our prediction came true. People want to believe in magic and all this like unrealistic thing a lot, and they find this evidence of the past. See, they knew that he made a prediction, turned out to be true. Most of the time, it's like throwing dart at something, and it just happened to be true. It's like that random thing, right? Like, so if somebody flips a coin and it lands heads 10 times, he has power. Yeah, but other 999 people didn't turn heads 10 times. You didn't ask them, did you? It's like you go to the lottery and like, you were feeling it. Yeah, I was feeling it. I'm going to win. Yeah, other people were feeling it as well. They didn't win. Shit like that. But yeah, people like to believe in this kind of like a pseudoscience a lot.
For example, gunned the kidnapped psychic down in a lonely field. His death is estimated to have happened on March 25th, just after the Enabling Act granted Chancellor Hitler the power to rule free of constitutional constraints. The first victim in Hitler's war with occultism. Thanks so much to Saley for helping to keep us extra historians connected across the globe. Last episode, we explored the strange contradiction inherent in Nazi ideology. While it drew on symbols imported from Eastern religions, superstitious folklore, and even pagan and pre-Christian traditions, the movement also wanted to be perceived as rationalist and modernist. The irony there, of course, being that they also rejected science in favor of so-called border sciences that had not been proven, but Nazis believed would prove true with further research. Now, that doesn't mean that the Nazis tolerated occult practitioners. Remember, good National Socialists were supposed to reject superstition. Yet, for its first 4 years in power, Hitler's regime was surprisingly hands-off about the large number of self-proclaimed clairvoyants, graphologers, mediums, psychics, and astrologers who'd become so pervasive in the miasma of anxiety that pervaded Weimar Germany. Because the fact was, a lot of these folks saw the meteoric rise of the Nazi Party, especially after Hitler's imprisonment after the beer hall putsch made him a national celebrity, and started tailoring their predictions to forecast the movement's rise. Therefore, a lot of opportunistic occultists, as well as theosophists, Ariosophists, and those interested in resurrecting Germanic religion, were absorbed into the Nazi orbit. In fact, there were those who felt that Hitler was being too lenient on occultists, and began a personal crusade of debunking those they saw as superstitious frauds. Chief among them was Matilde Ludendorff, second wife of the World War I general Erich Ludendorff, who'd thrown his weight behind Hitler's beer hall putsch, then retired from public life after an unsuccessful run for president in 1925. A psychologist, Dr. Ludendorff became an opponent of occultism after treating several patients she believed had been negatively impacted by supernatural dogma. She and her circle published articles and books attacking occult practitioners, exposing frauds, and criticizing what she saw as faulty pseudo-history. Things like linking German Aryans with the Indo-Aryans of India, belittling those who used the swastika and tried to connect Siegfried with Buddha and Krishna. She also published exposés on how mediums faked spirit activity in seances and the psychological techniques clairvoyants employed to make it seem like they were reading clients. In fact, Eric Hauneson,
Yeah, always like attaching to Hinduism and India. That people have this misconception. This is people told me in the comments like a lot of Indians were like towards like like Hitler rather than the other side. It's not because of like Hitler and like Nazis favored India and like Hinduism. It's because Indians hated British at that time. That was the whole thing, and the famine in Bengal didn't help, right? There was a saying in a long time like Indians saw Churchill as more evil than the Hitler because Churchill actually did damage in India, and they didn't know much about Hitler at the time. And this is not some internet age when people knew like how fucked up Hitler is.
from the beginning of this episode, was one of her favorite targets, at least until he turned up in a shallow grave. And if at this point you're thinking, oh man, finally a decent skeptic here, someone who's sensible and has her head on straight, well, not so fast there. See, one reason Dr. Ludendorff hated occultists so much was that she was a major promoter of the stab-in-the-back myth, an idea popularized by her husband that Germany only lost World War I because they were sabotaged on the home front by Jews, communists, pacifists, and,
Really?
she argued, occultists. Yeah, see, Dr. Ludendorff was seriously anti-religion. And I mean like really, really anti-religion. For instance, she considered Christianity to be a fraud. She once called Jesus a Jewish trickster who never died on the cross, and said that the religion should be abandoned. In fact, she created her
See, there's a saying in here like, even if your goal is somehow good, it matters how you reach that result, right? How you do it matters. That applies to a lot in today. Like a lot of people think they're right, and maybe they're right in what they're trying to achieve, but how they achieve is the problem. And this is what blurs the line, right? So even if you hate religion because you think religion comes in the way, I guess good on you or whatever, I don't know. But how you do that matters, right? And like doing all this weird shit is like, yeah, of course, that's just fucked up. Really, Germany like lost because like there was sabotage from inside. Really? You're using that argument to like defeat religion?
own polytheistic spiritual group known as the Society for Knowledge of a German God, attempting to resurrect German paganism. And in case you couldn't guess by now, her writings were also rabidly anti-Semitic. Then in the 1930s, she and her husband authored a series of increasingly unhinged books and pamphlets, insisting that occultists were secretly allied with Jesuits, Freemasons, Chinese magicians, Jews, the British royal family, African mystics, and socialists in a vast conspiracy to bring the German race down, all organized by their dark puppet.
You mean like how there is a space laser out there, as once said by a Congress member in America very recently? Yeah, shit doesn't change, does it?
Master, a man controlling it all from his remote mountaintop palace, the Dalai Lama. Yeah, real tinfoil hat stuff. In fact, the Ludendorff's pamphlets were so insane that by the early 1930s, the Nazis, trying to appear more moderate after winning seats in the legislature, were distancing themselves from the couple. Do you know how batshit you have to sound for the Nazis? The Nazis to distance themselves from you? However,
Yeah, Hitler was atheist, but even Hitler like Jesus is just walking away like, what the? That is some insane shit. People like that always exist, right? People hide behind somewhat smart words. Just because you're putting words together and making a sentence doesn't mean you're making sense, right? Throughout the years there's been many people who like sound smart. If you don't know what you're like, if you don't understand this subject, some people might influence you at a level that they sound smart, so you just believe them. But just because they can articulate some words and just make some sounds doesn't mean they know what the fuck they're talking about. Like, this is the fucked up thing. People always assume it's either this or that. Either people are morons or they're smart. But there's also like middle ground, a lot of middle ground, where like core of their ideologies and what they actually know is like dumb and stupid. But how to like communicate and like how to explain things, they know that. So this is how people dupe other people, right? And it's not like they're actually trying to dupe them. They are morons. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about, so they believe actually that stuff and spread that. And like it's like a spreading disease, right? It just spreads like that.
Third Reich's policy towards occultists began to shift in 1937, when the Gestapo received an unsolicited report by a debunker requesting that they take a more vigorous role in suppressing so-called unscientific occultism, while still allowing qualified figures to work on astrology, border sciences, and associated research. The assault was multi-pronged, with the Gestapo surveilling occultist societies for any sign of communism, individualism, or forming international connections. Likewise, any leadership figure that appeared to have a charismatic sway over followers were intimidated into silence as a way to cut off rival leaders. Especially targeted were those whose predictions contradicted party dogma. This was accompanied by a public information campaign of lectures and articles condemning superstition and charlatanry, while claiming that occult practices were a secret attack on Germany by Jews and Freemasons. New laws criminalized commercial astrology and palm reading, and once the war began, astrological calendars were also banned, due to the possibility of their use by the enemy in undermining morale. Meanwhile, a group of government-associated debunkers performed shows revealing the secrets behind everything from knocking at seances to card tricks. And what followed was, well, something kind of right out of Arrested Development. The Reich's Artists Union filed a protest with the government, complaining that their debunkers were robbing stage magicians of their livelihoods by revealing the secrets behind magic tricks. Their art, they argued, was purely for entertainment and should not be punished along with psychics and mediums. This feud between the magicians and debunkers stretched for 2 years into 1941, and the magicians eventually triumphed when Hitler personally exempted them. After all, they were showing their patriotism by entertaining troops while giving onstage disclaimers that nothing they did was supernatural. Then on May 10th, 1941, repressing occultism became a major priority, because on that day, Deputy Führer Rudolf Hess climbed into an aircraft in southern Germany and flew alone to the UK. After crashing in a field in Scotland, he was quickly apprehended and turned over to British interrogators. Hess told them that he'd come to negotiate peace between Germany and the British Empire. See, with the coming invasion of the Soviet Union, Hess feared a two-front war and decided he'd stop it by unilaterally negotiating peace. In doing so, he hoped to make Hitler proud. Spoiler alert, Hitler was not proud. In fact, upon receiving
I'm gonna take things into my hand, and I'm sure Hitler will be happy with that. Yeah, that never works.
Hess's letter explaining the action, he apparently screamed so loud that it echoed across his mountaintop vacation home. Something
you have to like mistake Hitler's ideology completely in order to do that shit, and he did that. I'm gonna do this, and Hitler will be happy. No.
had to be done immediately to reassure the public and signal Italy and Japan that Hitler was not trying to make a separate peace with Britain. And the solution was to portray Hess as mad in the German press, driven insane by World War I wounds, and foolishly falling prey to astrologers and mediums. As part of that, Reinhard Heydrich, a major rival of Hess and anti-occultist, later known as Heinrich the Hangman, unleashed a countrywide operation called Action Hess that arrested hundreds of occultist practitioners, closed their publications, and confiscated thousands of books.
Imagine that, like, why suddenly you're arresting all of us? Like, I get it, like, you hated occultists, but this feels extreme. Yeah, because an idiot just flew to Britain. It's like a political thing. We have to like show like good image around the people.
This time, it was not just the commercial psychics, but also Ariosophists and Theosophists, those that shared Nazi radical beliefs. Hess's personal astrologer was imprisoned, while some went to concentration camps. They never saw it coming, noted propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels in his diary. Yet this repression was not the end of occult practice in Nazi Germany, because while the Gestapo and security service swept up targets, they found themselves stymied by senior figures who wanted to protect those that practiced, quote, scientific astrology, who had degrees or were performing, quote, important work on
Scientific and astrology. I don't know if that sentence is like, if you write those two sentences, both of them try to push each other away, like, fuck out of here. That doesn't work.
dowsing and discovering enemy ships via pendulum. Also, the occult books confiscated were not burned like the others, rather redirected into the library of Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, because they were to be used in a grand project already underway. For in 1935, he had founded the Ahnenerbe, a society for the study of German ancestral heritage, and they had dispatched teams of academics to places as far-flung as Tibet and the Crimea, looking to find and verify the imagined past of supermen that underpinned their racial ideology, attempting to not only prove that the Germans were the world masters, but that in ages past.
Hold up there. You want to find like evidence of like Aryans, basically Indo-Aryans, basically which are in India as well, who basically went to India supposedly, Indo-Aryans and everything, like this Superman, implying there are Supermen in India because that is the heritage. And then you see everybody basically enslaved by British. You didn't see like, oh, wait a minute, maybe this theory is bullshit, right? Because if these like Aryans exist, if they are in India, wouldn't India be dominant at the time? Why would be they under like British rule multiple centuries by that time?
The newly invaded lands of Eastern Europe had belonged to them, which means next episode we'll be getting into what can only be described as the Indiana Jones stuff. Now, if you are familiar with that series of films, you'll surely remember two things. One, Indy punches just like a bunch of Nazis, and two, he does a lot of traveling. And if, like Dr. Jones, you find yourself traversing the globe today just without that handy travel montage complete with guiding red line, then you understand the benefits of a reliable internet connection while abroad. That was actually something I became painfully aware of last year when I was traveling in Germany. I got a
Very well, go to original video page, link it from there, support this channel. What is with the Indiana Jones and that movie? What was that movie, like Temple of Doom or something? Kalima, and just like rips out the heart or something. What does what does Kali have to do with any of that? Is this what you attest to, right? Like you don't know like Indian lore and mythology of how gods work, and you just see like who can be seen as like bit of like a, you know, like aggressive and dark-ish looking god, and let's attest to that. Kali wasn't dark. Kali wasn't bad in any way. It's just like aggressive, vengeful version of Parvati, right? I don't understand that. Like, it takes like literally 15 minutes to research that. Like, why do you need to like go there? I don't know. Alright, well, that was Nazi Occultism 3, Hitler versus Magic. It's just like, see, this is the thing, like, we see all the history of like how Nazis work in World War II, and we see how like they were running out of oil and resources. But when I hear all this shit, like, even if they were not running out of resources, eventually they would have shot themselves in the foot. All this shit was going on in the background. This is insane. Alright, well, I'll see you next time.